Well, happy Friday, guys. So we worked on completing the square on uh, Friday, Thursday, and Friday. And now we're looking at solving by completing the square. And remember, guys, this is the first set of notes that's going to be required for you guys to have done on time in order to get your opportunity to do your project. And also remember that the last two examples you're going to need to do on your own, and that way Monday when you come in, you'll be ready for the warm-up. Okay? So solving by completing the square. So just like when we were completing the square, we have to do something first. Okay? We looked for the value of C. So what you're going to do is what we have to do first is we have to move this to the other side because this is not a perfect square currently. So I'm going to add 98 to both sides. Alright, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the C value to the other side. So this is going to give me x squared minus 12x. I'm going to leave a space, and that equals 98. Okay, now the next thing you're going to do, okay, so the first thing I had to do is I had to move C to the right side. The next thing I'm going to do is I have to divide everything by A. Alright, so the very first thing is A here is 1, so I'm going to divide by 1. And I get x squared minus 12x space equals 98. Now, if A is 1, you don't actually have to do this, and now you can see why. But if A is not 1, then you have to do this before you complete the square. Okay? Now, you're going to find the value that goes here. This is the part that we've been working on. So it's half of B, so you've got negative 12 divided by 2 squared. Now, anytime we're dealing with an equation, the first thing we have to do is whatever we do to one side, we always have to do to the other. So if I'm adding it to this side, I'm also going to add it to this side. Okay? We didn't have to do this when we were completing the square in the other worksheets because we didn't have an equation. We just had an expression. Okay? But now since I have an equation, I have to add it to both sides. So this gives me x squared minus 12x. Negative 12 divided by 2 is going to be negative 6. Negative 6 squared is going to be 36. So I added 36 here, equals 98 plus 36. Okay? So now once I get to this point, I'm going to simplify the right side, and I'm also going to factor the left side as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. So the right side is going to be 134. Now, when I factor this, I want to write it as a perfect square. Okay, so it's going to be x. This sign here determines the sign that goes here. So if this is minus, then this is minus. Now what goes here, your factored form is going to be x plus b over 2 squared. So it's x minus, well b over 2 was negative 6, so it's going to be x minus 6 squared. Okay? So I have x minus 6 squared equals 134. Alright? So now I'm going to solve for x. How do I get rid of a square? I do the opposite, which is the square root. And I get x minus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 134. We're going to simplify the square root of 134. And 134, let me actually erase this here. So you got 134. Looking for perfect squares. So 2 squared is 4. 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. Let's check all these. 4 does not go into 134. 9 does not go into 134. 134 divided by 16 is a decimal. 134, it's not going to be 25. 36, no. So these so far, none of these go into it. 134 divided by 49 doesn't work. 134 divided by 64 also doesn't work. So no perfect squares go into 134. Okay? And remember, when you're simplifying a radical, that's all you're looking for, perfect squares. So the last thing I have to do is I have to add 6 to both sides, and this gives me x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 134. Okay? And this is my answer. Okay? From this point right here all the way down, the steps will always be the same for every example we do. Okay? How you solve them, it will be exactly the same. The only thing that'll change are the numbers. Alright. Make sure you're writing your steps too, please guys. I'm telling you now, it helps. So when I say the first thing you do, pause it. Write it down as step 1. I'll say the next thing you do is this. Pause it. Write it down as step 2. Okay? Alright. Let's look at example number 3, or example number 2 now. So, again, first thing we're going to do is we're going to move C to the other side. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I get 3r squared minus 6r. I'm going to leave a space. Equals, oops, not 6, it's actually 4. Okay? So now I am going to, okay, so first thing we had to do is we had to move C to the right side. Now we're going to divide by A. In this case, A is 3. These will cancel, give me r squared minus 6 divided by 3 is 2r. Space equals 4 over 3. And I'm actually going to put a plus here, because I know whatever I add here, I have to add here. Okay? So now I'm going to add b over 2a. So b over 2 squared. B is negative 2. I'm dividing it by 2. I'm squaring it. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1 squared, which is 1. So I'm going to add a 1 here, and I'm going to add a 1 here. Simplify the right side. 4 over 3, put this as 1, make that 3 over 3. 4 plus 3 is 7 over 3. Okay. Factor the left side. Okay, so the first thing we did was we found C, or we moved C to the right side. Second thing we do is we divide by A. Divide everything by A. Third thing, you're going to add B divided by 2 squared to both sides. Fourth thing, simplify the right side. Left side, you're going to factor. And if you remember, it's x plus b over 2 squared. So this is going to be r. The sign is the same as this, so it's minus 1 squared. So now I'm going to start solving. Again, this is the part that's the same the whole way down. So at this point, I take the square root of both sides, because the opposite of a square is a square root. This gives me r minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3. Add 1 to both sides, and I get r equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3. Now, I am not done, because if you remember, you're not allowed to have a radical, or a fraction under a radical, because you're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator. Okay? So, I'm going to go ahead and move this. I'm going to actually block it off so I can do some work here. So now, I have r equals 1 plus or minus. Whenever you have a fraction, you split it, so it's the square root of 7 over the square root of 3. Remember, I got to multiply by this, so I'm going to multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3. This gives me r equals 1 plus or minus square root 7 times 3 is 21 over square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. Square root of 21 can't be simplified, so then this becomes my answer. R equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 21 divided by 3. Okay? So, the last two examples now. Example number 3. Solve using, I abbreviated it as CTS, which is completing the square, is 3n squared plus 6n plus 1. And you need to do this on your own. And example number 4 says you're going to solve again using CTS, and the equation is 4p squared minus 8p minus 11 equals negative 5. So let's make sure that we're make sure you get your steps. I'm hoping I made them as clear as possible. I want you to write them in your words. Write your steps. Make sure you have the first two examples already completed, but based on what I wrote. And then example 3 and 4, you need to put in your best effort. Try to get them done for the warm-up on Friday, or excuse me, on Monday. And remember, this has to be done, otherwise you don't get credit, and anybody who is trying to do the project will lose that opportunity. Okay? I hope you guys have a great holiday weekend. Enjoy Easter and any special activities you guys get to participate in. And I will look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. Have a great night.